Oh, enough cannons down there too. Oh, this is a beautiful area.
Yeah, it is.
Oh, that way. He wants to go this way.
Ooh, river. Say hi. So this would be the barracks, I think.
Hey, Tony.
We're old magic cabinet.
Oh, wow. That gun, that thing is huge.
We get a bucket of water. Oh, no water. What the? That's the name of murder.
Always in trouble. What is it? What I got?
We need 5, 4 plus 4 and 2. This is the loading and firing of the great gun, or the 3-pound gun. After that, we will demonstrate the loading and firing of the wall gun. And then we will have one more firing of the cannon. So don't run off after the first shot. We're going to talk a little bit, and we're going to show you some more things going boom. So don't run off after the first shot. From the battery. Sir? And unfortunately, the cartridges we just brought out are for the smaller gun, so they're going to grab the cartridges for the bigger gun. Well, why not shoot big when we can? So we're going to go big. So he's going to go grab those other cartridges. We have 2 boxes that look exactly the same. So go over to super number 1 with your dad and tell him we need the whole box. Okay. And how many horses it took to get him here? We do know it took about a month and a half on a route that normally takes about 10 days. It took him a month and a half to get the cannons over here. In fact, the commander had left the guns on the other side of the mountain, figuring they'd never make it here. He brought several of the smaller ones, but didn't bring any of the big ones with him initially. So, the guns we're shooting are smoothbore. They are not rifled. The guns are also capable of hitting, if we were loading an actual projectile or ball, we could hit your cars in the parking lot fairly easy from here. We can actually hit something at about 1,200 yards without too much trouble. So, it's a 3-pound gun, which means it fires a 3-pound iron ball. So a ball roughly the size of a ball on a pool table. That's about the size of the ball we would be shooting out of this gun. Or you can shoot cartridge shot, which is going to be lots of smaller balls turning the cannon.
They'll tell you long before you need to cover your ears.
It's okay. Yeah. Big loud boot. What do you think they're pouring in there?
Lighting it.
Say guys?
What do you think?
This is the part where you want to cover your ears if you're afraid of loud noises. Give! Fire! Pound piece, which is typically called a swivel gun because it's mounted on a swivel, usually on the wall, not on a carriage. However, the ones they brought here, they did mount on carriages according to the commander's letters to the governor, just so they had extra guns on carriage. The gun we're going to fire next, just get a... is the wall gun, which can be looked at a couple of ways. As a very large musket, which is basically what it amounts to. It's a 96 caliber smoothbore musket. It fires a ball almost 1 inch in diameter. It weighs about 75 pounds. It shoots typically a 500 grain powder charge, so it shoots about 5 times the amount of powder we're normally shooting out of a musket. And its whole purpose, as far as invention and primary use, was to shoot at the enemy's artillery carriages. Because when they attacked the fort, they brought cannons that have big wheels, big axles. We're shooting at those axles, trying to knock those guns off the carriage because a cannon laying in the dirt is not much use. So that's what it was built for. Ideally, however, it can be loaded with shot and fired just like a big shotgun at infantry. It can also be loaded with one big solid ball at infantry, just like a cannon. So we know they had at least one here. Based on the archaeology, they found parts from one. So it's more than likely they had more than one. But yes, sir.
Wow.
We start with searching the piece. So this gentleman right here takes this screw-like device and runs it down the barrel, and he's checking to make sure there's nothing in the barrel from a previous shot, or in our case, some child hasn't stuck rocks or a bottle down the barrel, which there were 3 rocks in this barrel when we started. We then take the pick off of this gentleman's right here, and he's going to check the touch hole to make sure the touch hole is clean. We then tend the vent. So he then takes this piece of leather on his thumb called a thumb stall, and he's going to put it over that vent. That's going to basically seal off the barrel to any air being sucked in through that vent. We then advance the sponge, which is a lamb's wool sponge that's been soaked in water, and then he will ram that sponge down the barrel, and that will extinguish or put out anything in the barrel that might be burning from the previous shot, because obviously we don't want to put all that powder into a barrel with flaming objects in it. We then take the monkey, who's down here, who will run the cartridge up. The gun captain or gun commander calls for whatever size shot or what kind of shot he wants. The monkey brings it up. We then take it and charge the barrel with the cartridge. So the cartridge just gets set right in the end. We then take the other end of the sponge rammer, the ramming end, and that is used to ram the cartridge all the way down till it seats on the bottom of the gun. We then prime the piece. So you take that metal pick again, he's going to drop that through the touch hole, and it's going to pierce open the bag of powder inside. He then takes a musket cartridge and pours it in the touch hole. That's what we're using as our primer. We're not using fuses. So he's going to pour that on top. Then the gentleman with the lint stock, burning piece of lint, with the lint stock. Yeah, maybe it does hurt our hearing. I'm sorry. Yeah. Takes lint stock, which is simply rope, linen, or cotton cord that's been soaked in saltpeter and then dried. So it burns very, very hot, but very slow, called slow match. And he will touch that burning end that's up there at the top, right against that powder we poured on top. And if everything works right, you get that great boom. Yeah, the ball goes flying down and crushes Frenchmen somewhere.
Wait, we need to go 2 batteries.
Oh yeah, 2 batteries. Give 5.
Come in. Up in the guardhouse right up there. So that might have afforded a little bit room in here, but they wouldn't have had a big long table down the middle, probably another row of bunks. And this building siege and the surrender of the fort, there were about 250 people within the palisade walls. 2 companies of soldiers, roughly 200 men, and there were about, Captain Stewart was the officer of the South Carolina Provincials. They were sort of like uniformed militia. And his last letter at the time of the surrender said there were 20 civilians and women and as many children. Or out. Understand this is probably the most remote outpost on the English Empire in 1760. Our close.
Man is stalking me.
I could get powder, candles.
Was it powder from enemies or from faulty traders?
No, this is gunpowder.
You make it.
Bullet starters, all kinds of steel things. Now that we would have had. You know what that is?
It's like a wooden spoon.
It's a spoon that's made out of horn. So this is a horn spoon. And then steel, anything that was made out of steel, the guns, would have all come from trade. The cloth, actually the blankets would have been from trade.
That's cool. Wouldn't you use this?
Wrote an account that said that from a high point he could look into a valley and see more bison than he could possibly count.
Oh yeah.
And then within 100 years, they're all gone. Actually, less than that, about 75 years, they're all gone. And so you think about what an impact that would have on people that their whole livelihood is about the animals that are here. And that's their food, that's their clothing, that's their shelter, all of those things. And it affects people to a point where they have no other choice but to stand up and protest. And who fought in that war?
French and Indians
And
British.
the British. So the British needed some friends, right? So they were coming here and asking the men to go north and fight with them in the French and Indian War. Now, do you know what the French? You guys can come close. You don't have to stand too far back. I won't bite you, but once. Do you know why that was? You know, I have had all my shots. Do you know why the French and Indian War was fought?
Because both French and British were enemies, and they were both trying to claim land in India.
Yeah, right.
It was all about control of the population of the fur trade. That's all it was about. It was about the fur trade and who had control of those lands. So they would come here, ask us to go fight. Now, when we go fight, that leaves our towns unprotected. So they're open for raids because there's nothing there but the women and the young children. So we petitioned the British to build a fort here to guard our villages while we're gone and also to have trade with. And that worked swimmingly until one day on the way home from a battle up north, men walk into a field and they're not recognized as allies or friends, and they're fired on, and a bunch of them are killed. Well, as Cherokees, we have this really, really strange thing called a blood law. Now, this blood law applied to that situation, but the blood law applied to any situation where there was a loss of life. So let's say you killed my brother.
Jeez. What?
That was a really bad thing to do. It gets worse, though. So what happens with our blood law is that now I can walk into town with all these people standing around and I can kill you. or I
In
can
real
kill
life.
your son or your wife
You have a son?
or anybody you can. Probably at his age he would. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, he probably would. How old are you?
10.
No, not quite. But you're getting close. You'll be married by the time you're 15. So that was our blood law. So I could kill anybody I wanted to, and nobody can say anything. Well, this applied to Europeans, even though they didn't know anything about our blood law. So that was just one of the big battering points where heads start to come together and they don't see things the same way. Because if you're European and you kill somebody, it's like here. You're going to be arrested. You're going to sit in jail for 6 months while they talk about what they're going to do with you, and then they're going to take you out of jail. And if they find you guilty of one of several charges that they can slide that into, they might just slap you on the wrist and let you go. The worst, they'd hang you. But that didn't happen as much as slapping you on the wrist and let you go. And that's what led us to this point. Because if you knew that you go into the 7-Eleven and shoot the clerk, that the clerk's family can shoot you, your world's going to change. It's going to be different. Another thing that we did, out in these rivers are turtles. And this was a time when there were no rednecks and great big trucks to run over them. So the turtles would get huge. They would get so big, you could use the shells as winnowing bowls. So we're talking a big turtle. Now, a big turtle also has a big paw. And that big paw would be cut off and put by the fire to dry, outstretched. And on each one of those claws or those fingers is going to be a big claw, and it's going to stick out like this. So I'm going to pick on you, sorry. No, I'll pick on you. Come here a minute. What's your name?
Braxton.
Braxton. Come here, Braxton. Braxton has been a very bad boy.
Oh, Braxton.
So, Braxton, there's a price to pay. Now, being a bad boy probably only means that you mouthed off to one of your elders. I mean, you didn't have to do anything too bad, but it was a bad thing because we were taught from a tiny age respect. So that's just not something you did. But he forgot, lost his temper, said something that he shouldn't have said, and now he's in trouble. So we bring him in front of the whole town, and we tell them what he did. And then we take his shirt off. And then we turn him around, and I take that turtle paw, and I scratch his shoulder, and I scratch that shoulder until he bleeds. And then I turn him around, and I scratch here, and I scratch here until he bleeds. And then I scratch here and here. So he's a bloody mess by the time we're done. Now, until that totally heals and looks like this nice, pretty white skin right here, he's treated as if he does not exist.
Oh, wow.
So he doesn't get to sleep at home. So if it's wintertime, he's going to freeze to death because he doesn't get his clothes taken care of. He has to do that.
Reenact that whole thing in today's society.
It wouldn't just that's what this young man over here doesn't own it. He's taking care of it. He lives here. If he decides for some reason to move, only thing he's responsible for is taking care of it, so that when this young man gets ready to move in with his family, all he has to do is move in. So it's like a shared possession. It's not owned. So when Europeans come in and they walk up and they say, "The king told us that I now own this land." I'm going, what are you talking about, a king? Well, I'm putting up a fence, and you can go on that side of the fence, but you can't go on this side. That's the dumbest thing I ever heard. That's been going back and forth to the river for thousands of years. Now, because some guy I've never heard of told you to put up a fence, I'm not allowed to do it. So you have that possession at the time of all the properties. So now a white guy comes in and he marries an Indian woman, and no, he doesn't have anything. In fact, if he tries to enforce that, he'll be dead by dark. So you see all of these matches that keep getting lit and trying to light a fire, and they eventually do light a fire. Now, Europeans come here and they take as much of the. I'm gonna review my little deal here. Let's see. So remember, some of you were standing here when I said the Robinsons came to Fort Nashboro and established Fort Nashboro in the 1760s, and he saw more bison that he could possibly count. In 1795, the last two reports of bison were reported in Nashville. In the river, just a little bit of ways from the fort that was in the river.
I want to hear about this war hammer you got on the back there.
This?
No, that's such a
This?
that one. Yes.
Okay, there was a time that we didn't have steel, and this is what we used. It's called a ball head war club. It's made out of the root of a tree, which is the hardest part, and that's all it was used for, banging heads. Because we had rocks and sticks. So when the Europeans come here, they walk into a society that's dealing with rocks and sticks, and they bring that and the powder, and they bring cannons, and they bring cloth, and they bring all those things. So we quickly became addicted to them. No, we just count scalps. Which, by the way, where did that come from? Came from Europeans. Do you know why?
You got paid for them.
We got paid for them. So French scalps were sold to the British. British scalps were sold to the French because they just wanted proof that you had killed one of their enemies. That's all they wanted. And then we got smart enough to be able to split two scalps and sell them as two. We also learned how to sell them as horsetail. And they just didn't know the difference. This is real human hair. I did not scalp anybody. These were worn.
They were a status symbol, weren't they?
They were
Powder horn.
a powder horn. And what goes in it?
Gunpowder.
Gunpowder. Everybody knows what these are? Our knives. Tomahawks, steel. Again, trade item. Very, very valuable trade item. The beads are all trade. The wool would have been trade. The shirts would have been trade. The wampum would have been trade, but from other natives up north. So the wampum would have come from up north. The British started making glass wampum, and they would use it as trade as well. But the glass wampum was not as valuable as the real wampum.
But that had
Koya is, do you know what years? Okay, so Koya is 1800s. So late 1700s, early 1800s. Anybody know when our first confrontation with Europeans was? 1540.
Oh, wow.
Do you know how much time between 1540 and 1800 can change things? I mean, look at how our lives have changed in 50 years or 60 years just by technology. So it's the same thing. These people walk in 1540, and it was DeSoto. And DeSoto came across the southeastern part of the United States and worked his way into the coast.
You know what that is?
So they show up and they've got helmets, they've got steel, they got matchlocks, they have all these things. So we instantly start trading with the ones that we can deal with. Now, somebody earlier said, yeah, but they also brought disease. That's true. When DeSoto came here, we have a ceremony called going to water, and it would be done sometimes 7 times a day. So we were clean, relatively clean people, as opposed to Europeans. Now, we've all heard of spring weddings, right? Do you know why they have spring weddings?
The water's warm enough to use.
Do what?
The water's warm enough to use.
Close. Because that was the time of the year they took their bath, a full bath, and they had their clothes sewn onto them. They were made on. This is not the posh people. This is just your normal people. And they would fill the church with flowers so you couldn't smell each other. So when
completely covered from the rump all the way to the tip with a beautiful pink ribbon. And Possum said, "Hey, wait a minute, what's the idea here? They can't see my big beautiful tail for this ribbon." And Cricket said, no, wait until the big dance tonight, and at the dance you can pull the string from this ribbon and your tail will burst out in all of its glory and they'll all see it. Possum liked this idea. Yes, this is what needs to happen. Everyone needs to see my big beautiful tail in action. And the wind will blow through it and it'll shine with a light that comes from within, right? So they had the dance and the party and the drums were going. And Possum, they announced him coming, and here he comes. And he parts the crowd and everybody's cheering. Cheering on Possum. He's having his party. He gets up there and he says, "Do you want to see my big, beautiful, bushy tail?" And all the other animals, yes, cheering. And he says, "I can't hear you. Do you want to see my big, beautiful, bushy tail?" They're cheering him on. He reaches down, yanks that ribbon loose, and it's as bald as it can be. Possum looks straight up at Creator, grabs his heart. He passes out with all 4 feet sticking straight up. And did you know that still to this day, Possum has a bald tail? And if you scare him hard enough, he will pass out. All 4 feet straight in the air, teaching up. I guided a trip and I took a big doctor into the Dismal Swamp to kill this bear. We treat a smaller bear. And we went to get the dogs, and it was a 125-pounder. And I told him, I said, "It's not a very good bear. You paid a lot of money. Why don't you wait a little while?" And he said, "No, I'm killing that one." And I said, "Well, let me get the dogs caught." I got...
Yeah, I don't think I'd accidentally walk into that, but those thorns,
Yeah,
yes, very possible.
there's a man in there.
Flooding too many. Ladies and gentlemen, we are going to demonstrate for you the manual of arms. Well, most of the manual of arms. We leave a couple of pieces out for our old and infirmed members so they don't have to kneel down, because that's just not pretty for any of us. So, however, we're doing the manual of arms briefly. It's the drill the soldiers would go through when they were on duty on a daily basis, simply to develop that muscle memory, much like the military does today, where you drill over and over and over. So you just develop the muscle memory to do the actions. Head open your files. To the left. By the left. Face. Mark. Hold. All right. Rest your firelock. Order your firelock. Rest your firelock. Club your firelock. It looks good. Rest your firelock. That's why he's hiding in the rear rank. So I can't see what he's doing. Shoulder your arms. No. Belay that. Back to the. Yeah. Shoulder your arms. Gear your arms. Fix. Bayonet. Poise your bayonet. Shoulder your arms. Present your arms. Charge your bayonet. Let's try to all do it at the same time. Charge your bayonet. All right, we're going to wheel the soldiers, go out just through the gate and a little bit further. Then we will line up and we will demonstrate the loading and firing of the musket if you'd like to see it. Wheel to the right about by company.
I'm sorry.
Only one note. Yeah. Let's submit it for a second.
Watch it.
Thank you. So what we're going to demonstrate for you is called volley fire. And that would be when all the soldiers load at the same time and then they all fire at the same time. Now the standard company that was stationed here at Fort Loudon would have been 100 soldiers. So at any given time you had roughly a third of them on duty. But if they were going out to battle, you would have had all 100, give or take. So the first thing you have to imagine is there would have been more than 8 of us. The second thing is, if we had all 100, they would be in 3 ranks or 3 rows. And when we fired, the front rank kneels, the 2 back ranks remain standing, and everybody fires at the same time, potentially putting anywhere from 1. Present. Fire! Prime and load. So your average. Present. Fire! Prime and load. Present. Fire! Nice volley. Recover.
Here, which is a stone that we sharpen into an edge. And when this type of stone hits a piece of hardened steel, it creates a shower of sparks. So this is our frizzen or hammer. In earlier days, was called a hammer. This was called a cock because it looks like the head of a chicken, basically. So that's later on we call this in modern guns, we call this the hammer, but back then we called this a hammer and this a cock. So you've heard going off half cocked. That's half cock. That's full cock. So if one of these goes off when it's only at half cock, it shouldn't. But if it did, that's where we get that term from. So sharpened piece of flint, hardened piece of steel. When we pull the trigger, shower of sparks drops into the pan that's inside here, this little pan here. So this pan is where I'm going to put my priming powder. I'm going to take a cartridge out of my cartridge box. Normally there would be a lead ball tied to the bottom of this paper cartridge. That's a bullet. Flick it open with your thumb. Requirement of the British Army, you had to have 2 good teeth, one on the top and one on the bottom. So you can tear that open. True story. We sprinkle a little bit of this powder charge into this little depression, this little pan, and there's a hole that's drilled in the side of the barrel. Okay, so now that powder that hole is exposed to this little group of powder here. I take the main charge, I load it down the barrel, take out my ramrod, back that home. Now, if all goes well, what's going to happen is chiseled rock is going to hit hardened steel, shower sparks, ignite that powder. It's going to run through that hole and ignite the main charge and send my round down. Fire musket. If all goes well.
Since the musket isn't very accurate, how, whenever you put the bayonets on the end, how does it prevent from hitting the bayonet and ricocheting?
Well, you can't shoot with the bayonet fixed because it's a tube. You can see it's hollow. So when it's on there, the barrel actually comes out past the edge of the bayonet, so it's not going to interfere with it all. And even if it came out like that, it's going to clear this because it's bigger.
Right.
You know, but you really, and you don't see them shoot very much with the bayonet fixed. If you're going to fix bayonets, that means you're close enough to charge, and you're not going to be shooting. You're going to be concentrating on running towards the end. And the British did have a lot of bayonet charges. They did perfect that, and it's frightening when you're on the other end of it. So.
Howdy, folks.
Hey, how are you?
Doing fine. Finally getting to heat up some metal today now. Get your wood stripped out and wet it, and you can get it to where it forms on that. I can make a jig to where I can tack it on there and have a bunch of holes all the way around it. If you come over on this side over here, you can see it work better. Is this your all's first time here?
Yes.
Good. Enjoy. This is the blacksmith shop. This is where all the major stuff got made for this board. We get it pretty hot. And what I'm doing is tapering it down. I'm not wanting to draw it, I'm just wanting to taper it down. And I gotta watch the nose of it. You don't want to forward and backwards is I don't want a honeycomb dip in the nose of that. It'll be a void in it. Because here in a little bit, I'll smack the corners and really get a good sharp point into it so you can drive it into the ground. Stop doing it because I was demonstrating it up there. And I was always keeping an eye on all the kids because I was out of here with horses. This would have been making rings, bridle rings. You know, if somebody had brought in another new horse and his bridle wasn't real good, if it was feasible, I would take his bridle that he had, his bit, for the horse's mouth, and I would reforge it for him, or either I would make a new one, and then I'd put new rings on it, or I'd retrofit his stuff on the new one. So things like that, anything that had anything to do with the tool to make, we would have made it here. Well, for instance, this would be one of the main things that you have to have in your anvil. This anvil will be the arrow of that time, and then this is your post vise, which, you know, we get a hold of a piece of locust and we just stick it in the ground, and then we attach the post vise to it. Post vise has a mushroom head, and then you have your top neck plate, which just holds everything in place, your spring and your jaws of your vise. And then you got, you know, righty-tighty and lefty-loosey. Chamber bellows. How it works is when I pull down on this, the bottom chamber fills the top chamber up. So when I fill it up, and I pull on it, draw on it, feed my fire, you listen to the air blowing in there, it's just going like a pair of lungs. But when I let go of it, it constantly keeps blowing because the second chamber is filling up with air to give me double air. So when I pull on it, it's blowing twice. Actually, you just don't hear it unless I let go of it. So that's what it's there. It doesn't take long to keep it hot. No, you didn't have no access to any kind of grease or anything there in the 1700s unless you saved a lot of fat backs off of cattle or wild boar or something. And you can see what little bit of charcoal I dumped in there. It doesn't take much to get a good fire going. And I've only pulled on it, what, half a dozen times? So. And that's how hot it got real quick again. The tip of it was about that temperature in back here. So I started pulling on it. Let me get the front of it more.
Those are knives that I've made that are representative of the period knives that were floating around as part of the world at the time. That's a very secret item. It's my glass case.
Ah. I like your glasses.
Yeah, that's pretty
Those are
neat.
18th century style reading glasses.
Where'd you get those at?
A place called Townsend. It's a company that makes period clothes. The shirt and his waistcoat are made by Townsend.
Oh no.
Your what they call a cow's knee. It's you put that over the lock so that it doesn't draw moisture, and then when you're ready to shoot it, it goes bang instead of click.
Oh, okay. So it's over the lock of your rifle while you're not using it.
Yeah, when
musket.
You just carry it down like that, and it keeps like in the morning if you're hunting, the dew forming on it forms on this and not on your lock. And then you know like if you're walking through the woods, you may tie it, but when you get down ready to sitting still, you probably take it out.
This looks like the officers' quarters.
So when I said these guys had all these sea biscuits, right? Not the horse. They would have loved that flour. They probably got some of it. They probably traded with the local Cherokee, but the Cherokee aren't going to give you all their food. Right. So I probably didn't get enough to feed 200 men.
This is the guardhouse. This is the commander's quarters.
My favorite part was when the Cherokee Indian was talking.